The message sent at 11:47 p.m. 1 second. One wrong tap. Cairo Adebayo stared at his phone screen and felt the air leave his chest. The name at the top of the thread wasn't right. It wasn't even close. He'd been sitting at table 12 of Lumiere, one of those rooftop restaurants in downtown Chicago where the chandeliers cost more than most people's cars and the wait staff never made eye contact unless you wanted them to. The kind of place where powerful men came to make quiet decisions that would shake ordinary lives by morning. Cairo didn't belong here by accident. He never went anywhere by accident. But his hands, steady in boardrooms, steady under pressure, had slipped. The message was gone. Sent. 3 lines of fragmented text that were never supposed to leave his drafts. 3 lines that named a man, named a location, and referenced a file that didn't officially exist. 3 lines that could get him killed before sunrise. He hit recall. The option grayed out immediately. Already delivered. Already read. 2 blue checkmarks blinked back at him like they were laughing. Cairo set the phone face down on the white tablecloth and pressed his fingers flat against the surface. Around him, the restaurant moved in its slow, expensive rhythm. Crystal glasses catching candlelight. Low conversations wrapped in cologne and ambition. A jazz trio near the bar playing something that felt more like background noise than music. Nobody looked at him. Nobody ever did, not until they needed something. That was the arrangement. That was always the arrangement. He flipped the phone back over. The contact name stared at him. Cale Draven. Not Malik. Not his handler. Not anyone in his network. Cale Draven. CEO. Alpha King. The kind of man whose name alone caused other powerful men to straighten their spines in meetings they'd called themselves. Cairo's jaw tightened. He typed fast, fingers moving the way his voice never could. Disregard that. Wrong contact. My apologies. He hit send. Watched it deliver. Waited. Hi viewers, if a single wrong text could put your life on the line tonight, would you have the nerve to stay in that room? Drop your answer below. The restaurant kept moving around him. A waiter passed with a silver tray. Someone near the window laughed too loud for the setting. Cairo's phone screen stayed dark. No reply. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Counted 4 seconds. Then 8. Maybe Cale Draven was the kind of man who got dozens of misdirected messages a week from numbers he didn't recognize. Maybe this was nothing. Maybe. The phone lit up. 1 message. No greeting. No confusion. No question about who he was or how he'd gotten the number. Just 7 words. You just made a very dangerous mistake. Cairo's eyes didn't move from the screen. His pulse did. He looked up from the table, slow, controlled, the way he trained himself to move in rooms where showing fear was the same as losing. Across the restaurant, past the bar, near the elevator bank, a man in a dark coat was watching him. Not glancing. Watching. The phone buzzed again. Cale Draven had sent a second message. The second message was 3 words. Don't move. Yet. Cairo didn't. Not because he was scared. Fear was a luxury he'd stopped carrying a long time ago. He didn't move because the instruction was precise. And precise instructions from unknown sources in high-risk environments were data points, not threats. He filed it. Read it again. Then looked back at the elevator bank. The man in the dark coat was gone. Cairo turned the phone over in his hand, careful, unhurried, and opened his secure notes app. He pulled up the file he'd been building for 11 weeks. A layered record of financial transactions disguised as biotech investments, shell accounts cycling through 4 different countries, and a pattern that only became visible when you looked at the withdrawals, not the deposits. Most people looked at the deposits. That was the mistake. He'd caught it because he looked at everything. That's what he did. Ghost consulting for clients who needed their money understood at a level that went past spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Clients who paid him well and asked no personal questions, which suited Cairo perfectly, because personal questions always led to the one he couldn't answer out loud. Why don't you speak? He could. Technically. The chords worked. The anatomy was intact. Every specialist who'd ever run the assessment said the same thing. Physiologically, there was no obstruction. But the voice hadn't come since he was 19. He'd stopped waiting for it somewhere around 22. Now he was 27, seated in a restaurant that charged $40 for bread service, and somewhere in this building the man whose name was in his phone was either 3 steps ahead of him or about to make a move he couldn't predict. Neither option was comfortable. He flagged a waiter with 2 fingers, the quiet, practiced gesture that always worked, and typed a message on his phone, turning the screen so the waiter could read it. Water. Still. No ice. The waiter nodded and moved off without a word. Cairo appreciated that. He always sat in sections where the staff had learned not to ask him to repeat himself. His eyes moved to the private corridor on the far left side of the restaurant, past the main dining area, past the bar, through a brushed steel door that stayed closed all evening. A man had gone through it 20 minutes ago. Soren Virex. Publicly. Co-founder of Medaxon Biotech, philanthropist, keynote speaker at 3 healthcare conferences in the last calendar year. Privately, the name that appeared in the center of Cairo's 11-week file, connected to every transaction that didn't make sense, every account that opened and closed too fast, every signature that was almost, but not quite, real. Cairo had come tonight specifically because Soren would be here. He hadn't planned to text anyone. He certainly hadn't planned to text that name. The brushed steel door opened. A man in a fitted suit stepped out, not Soren. One of his people. And the man's eyes moved across the restaurant in the flat, professional way that had nothing to do with looking for a table. It had everything to do with looking for a person. The scan stopped. Landed on Cairo. His phone buzzed. Cale Draven again. The man who just looked at you. He works for Virex. You need to leave that table in the next 4 minutes. Cairo stared at the message. Then at the man by the door. Then back at the message. He typed, "How are you watching this?" The reply came in under 10 seconds. "I'm not watching the room." A pause. "I'm watching you." Cairo typed back immediately. That's not reassuring. The response came without delay. It wasn't meant to be. 4 minutes, Cairo. Move. He stopped. Read the message again. His name. Cale Draven had used his name. And Cairo had never sent it. The message he'd accidentally fired off was fragmented. 3 lines of evidence and a location timestamp. No signature. No contact info beyond the number itself. He typed, "I didn't give you my name." "No. You didn't." That was all. No explanation. No follow-up. Cairo stood up from the table. Not fast. Fast was panic and panic was visible. He rose the way he always rose, like the decision had been made before anyone else in the room noticed he was making one. He lifted his jacket from the back of the chair, left $40 on the table for a drink he hadn't finished, and moved toward the main floor. His phone buzzed. Not the front exit. He adjusted course without breaking stride. The bar had a side passage, narrow, low-lit, used by staff for tray service. Cairo had clocked it when he first arrived. He clocked every exit before he ordered anything. Old habit. Useful one. He pushed through and found himself in a service corridor that smelled like linen and industrial cleaner. Elevator at the end. He hit the button and waited, back against the wall, watching both ends of the hallway. "He's moving," Cale texted. Cairo typed. Virex? His man. The one who made eye contact. He's out of his seat. The elevator opened. Cairo stepped in, hit lobby, and watched the doors close. Then he typed. You pulled my name from an unlisted number in under 6 minutes. You have eyes inside that restaurant. And you're communicating with me in real time like you've been tracking this situation longer than tonight. He hit send. Waited. The elevator descended. Kale's reply came somewhere between the 23rd and 21st floors. You're not wrong. Then stop managing this like I'm a variable and start talking like I'm a person. Silence. 15 seconds. You were investigating Virex. Yes. For how long? 11 weeks. Another pause. Longer this time. What did you find? Cairo thought about that. Thought about what he'd built, the file, the patterns, the accounts that cycled money in spirals too clean to be anything but intentional. Thought about how long it had taken him to see the shape of it. He typed. Enough. The lobby hit. Doors opened. The hotel lobby was marble and low lighting and the kind of quiet that money bought. 2 men near the revolving door, both in suits, both positioned wrong for guests. Cairo stopped walking. Typed fast. Front of the lobby. 2 of them. I know. Don't go to the street. Then where? A beat. Turn left. There's a private lounge. Tell the host at the door your name. Cairo didn't move immediately. He typed. You just told me you pulled my name from nothing. Now you want me to walk toward a door you're controlling? The response was immediate. Yes. Give me one reason. Kale sent back exactly one line. Because the man behind you just came out of the elevator. Cairo turned left. He found the door. Dark wood brass handle, a host in a charcoal blazer standing just inside. The host looked at him without a word. Cairo typed his own name on his phone screen and held it up. The host stepped aside. Inside, low ceilings, leather seating, a bar that wasn't open, and, at the far end of the room, standing with his jacket over one arm and his phone in his hand. A man who looked up the moment Cairo walked through the door. Tall. Dark. The kind of quiet that wasn't calm, it was controlled. Eyes that had already taken in the room before Cairo had taken in his face. Cale Draven looked at him for exactly 1 second before he typed something. Cairo's phone buzzed. Now we can talk. Cale didn't offer a handshake. He gestured to the leather chair across from him and sat down first. Unhurried, deliberate, the kind of movement that said he never needed anyone to wait for his comfort. Cairo sat. Either of them spoke. Obviously. One of them couldn't, and the other seemed to understand, without being told, that questions shouted across a room were different from questions worth asking. Cale set his phone on the table between them. Face up. You found financial trails inside Medaxon. Not a question. Cairo typed back. Yes. Accounts cycling money through biotech subsidiary shells. Yes. 11 weeks. Independently. A pause. Then, no one hired you for this. Cairo typed. No. Cale studied him. Not the way most people studied him, not trying to solve the silence, not calculating an angle on it. Just reading. Taking in the information in front of him the same way Cairo took in a financial trail. Virex isn't running this alone. Cale typed. Cairo looked at the message. Thought for a moment. Then, I know. The accounts I've been watching for the last 4 months run parallel to what you found. They connect at a point you haven't reached yet. That landed? Cairo typed slowly. What point? Cale looked at him. Then his phone. Before he could respond, the door to the private lounge opened. 2 men. The same build as the ones at the lobby entrance. Different faces, same posture. One of them had his hand inside his jacket. Kale stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. He looked at the man nearest the door with the particular stillness of someone who had never once in his adult life needed to prove what he was capable of. "Tell Virex," Kale said out loud clearly, in a voice that didn't negotiate, "that he just walked his people into a federal corridor. This room is on leased property under my company's registered address. Which means everything that happens in here, and everyone who entered uninvited, is already documented." He held up his phone. "I've had 3 cameras running since he sat down at table 6 tonight." The silence that followed was the specific kind that happened when someone realizes the ground they were standing on wasn't theirs. The 2 men looked at each other. Then they left. No confrontation. No escalation. Just the door closing quietly behind them. Kale sat back down. Cairo stared at him. "Typed. You planned for this." "I planned for everything. That wasn't improvised." "No." Cairo set the phone down. Looked at the door. Looked back at Kale. "The cameras. The leased corridor. You knew Virex would move tonight." "I suspected." "You confirmed it when your message came through." "A beat. You gave me the exact timestamp and location I needed." Cairo processed that. Then, "So I was useful to you." Kale looked at the message for a moment. Then he typed back, and Cairo could tell, by the pause before it sent, that it was the most honest thing he'd said all night. "You were the only person in that building who had what I needed." They sat with that. Outside, somewhere down the corridor, a door closed. Then quiet. Kale typed, "Virex's visible operation is exposed. My legal team activates in the morning. You're safe tonight." Cairo looked at the words. "Safe." He typed back slowly. "And tomorrow?" Kale looked at him across the table. His expression didn't shift. Didn't soften. Didn't offer comfort. He typed, "That depends on what's in the part of the file you didn't show me." Across the restaurant, 3 floors up, through a camera feed on a phone Cairo would never see, Soren Virex watched the footage of his 2 men walking back to the elevator. And he smiled. Not the smile of a man who'd lost. The smile of a man who just confirmed something he needed to know. The penthouse was on the 44th floor. Cairo had been in expensive spaces before. Marble lobbies. Corner offices with floor-to-ceiling glass. Boardrooms where the chairs cost more than the decisions being made inside them. He learned, a long time ago, that wealth had a texture, and the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself felt different from the kind that did. Cale Draven's penthouse felt like the first kind. Dark wood. Clean lines. A wall of glass facing the Chicago skyline that turned the city into something that looked almost quiet from up here. A kitchen that had the expensive silence of a room rarely used. Bookshelves that weren't decorative, the spines were cracked, the order imperfect. Someone actually read them. Cairo stood near the window and typed, "I'm not staying long." Cale, from across the room, typed back, "You're not leaving tonight. That's not your call. Virex knows you were in that building. He knows you made contact with someone. He doesn't know who yet. But his people are running the footage from the lobby right now." A pause. "You go back to wherever you live tonight, and by morning they'll have the address." Cairo looked at the city. The lights running in grids below. Somewhere down there, his apartment. His monitors. The 11 weeks of files he'd built line by line in the quiet hours when most of the city was asleep. He typed, "I'll move the files to a secondary drive. I already have people at your building." Cairo turned from the window. Cale met his eyes without apology. "I made calls while we were in the car," he typed. "The drives are being pulled by my security team and brought here. Your cat is fine. I told them not to touch anything else." Cairo stared at him. Typed very slowly. I don't have a cat. The neighbor's cat. It was in the hallway apparently. My guy thought it was yours. Cairo looked at the message for a long moment. Then he typed. You sent strangers into my apartment without asking me. Yes. While I was in the car with you. Yes. And you don't see a problem with that? Cale's pause before typing was brief. Then, the problem I saw was leaving 11 weeks of evidence inside an unsecured building while a man with the resources to make it disappear knew you existed. Cairo looked at the response. It wasn't wrong. That was the frustrating part. He crossed to the couch and sat. Not comfortable, positioned. Back where he could see both the door and the window. Old habit. Useful one. He opened the secure file on his phone, the version he carried, not the full build, and after a moment's consideration typed. I'll show you the framework. Not the source confirmation. Why not the source? Because I don't know you. You're sitting in my penthouse. You moved fast, you're resourceful, and you had a reason to pull Virex tonight that has nothing to do with me. That makes you useful? It doesn't make you safe. Cale looked at him across the room for a moment. Then he typed. Fair. They worked for 2 hours. Cairo laid out the financial skeleton, the shell accounts, the cycling pattern, the way the biotech subsidiaries were used as buffers between clean money and transactions that couldn't survive scrutiny. He typed in short blocks, precise, no repetition. Cale read each one without interrupting. Occasionally he'd open something on his own laptop and verify a number, then close it and keep reading. He was fast. Faster than most people Cairo had worked with. Most people needed the shape explained to them before they could see the pattern. Cale saw the pattern while Cairo was still drawing the shape. It was, despite everything, a strange kind of relief. Around 2 a.m., Cale set his laptop aside and typed. There are 3 accounts you track that I can't place inside Medaxon's structure. They don't match any subsidiary I've identified. Cairo looked at the screen. I know. Where do they connect? That's the part one haven't confirmed yet. But you have a direction. Cairo looked at the question. Looked at the window. The city had gone quieter at this hour, not silent, never silent, but the grid of lights below felt like it was holding its breath. He typed. The accounts don't connect outward. They connect up. Cale was still. Up. He typed back. Inside an existing structure. Something with enough cover that the transactions look like normal operations from the outside. What kind of structure? Cairo typed slowly. The kind someone already trusted would have access to. Cale didn't respond immediately. When he did, the message was short. How long have you known this? 3 weeks. And you didn't move on it? Because moving on a guess gets people killed. I needed the confirmation. Cairo paused. Then, I still need it. Cale set his phone down. He leaned back, one arm over the back of the chair, and looked at Cairo across the space between them, not calculating, not suspicious. Something more like the expression of a man who had just learned that the problem he thought he was solving was the smaller half of a larger one. Cairo typed one more line before the silence stretched too long. This isn't over. Cale looked at the message. Then at Cairo. He didn't type back. He didn't need to. Because somewhere in his penthouse, on the secure laptop he'd used to cross-reference Cairo's data, a process had completed quietly in the background. An internal access log. One of his own executive-level accounts. A login at 11:52 p.m. 5 minutes after Cairo's wrong message had been sent. The morning news said Medaxon Biotech was under federal review. By noon, 3 of Soren Virex's visible accounts had been froze. Cale's legal team had moved fast, faster than Cairo expected, faster than most legal teams were capable of moving. Injunctions filed. Subsidiaries flagged. 2 board members who'd signed documents they shouldn't have signed were already talking to investigators without being asked twice. From the outside, it looked finished. Clean. Decisive. Done. Cairo watched the news feed from the corner chair in Cale's penthouse and felt nothing that resembled relief. Because the 3 accounts he hadn't shown Cale yet, the ones that connected upward, not outward, none of them had moved. Not one. A frozen operation panics. Money shifts. People make calls they shouldn't make from numbers they should have burned. The pattern always broke the same way under pressure. These accounts hadn't flinched. That meant one of 2 things. Either the people behind them didn't know the operation had been touched, or they'd known it was coming. Cairo leaned forward and opened his encrypted monitor. He pulled up the transaction log he'd been running passively for 72 hours, a shadow record that tracked activity across the flagged accounts in real time, independent of any official system. He stared at the timestamp column. The accounts hadn't moved since 11:49 p.m. 2 nights ago. 2 minutes after his wrong message had been sent. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he pulled up the access log Cale had found that first night, the one that had shown an internal login from an executive-level account at 11:52 p.m. He lined the timestamps up side by side. His wrong message, 11:47. The accounts go quiet, 11:49. The internal login, 11:52. 3 data points. 5 minutes apart. Not coincidence. Someone had known. Not suspected. Known. Fast enough to shut down the financial trail before Cale's team even started looking. Which meant someone inside Cale's own executive structure had been watching the situation before Cairo's message even sent. Cairo typed fast and crossed the room to where Cale was on a call. He held up the phone screen without interrupting. Cale looked at the timestamps. His expression didn't change. But the call ended in under 15 seconds. He took the phone. Read it again. Set it on the desk and looked at Cairo. Then he typed slowly. Someone on my floor shut those accounts down before my legal team activated. Yes. Before I even knew your message existed. Yes. Cale looked at the window. The city outside. The skyline that had made him look untouchable for a decade. He typed one more line. That means they were already positioned. Cairo nodded once. You didn't stop the operation. He typed back. You only removed the surface. The room was very quiet. Cale's laptop was still open on the desk behind him. The screen had gone dark on its own, automatic timeout. But the access log was still pulled up on Cairo's monitor. And the login, the one from the executive floor, had a username attached to it. Cairo hadn't shown Cale that part yet. Because the username belonged to someone whose name appeared in the same file as Soren Virex. Not as a target. As a contact. Cale pulled the username himself. Cairo watched him do it. Watched the moment the search returned the result. Watched Cale's hands go still on the keyboard the way hands go still when the body understands something before the mind is ready to accept it. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the screen. The name was Lucien Verek. Cale's chief strategy officer. 12 years. The man who had been in the room for every major decision Cale had made since the company was a different shape than it was now. The man whose handwriting was on the foundational documents. Whose opinion Cale had sought before board votes, before acquisitions, before anything that carried real weight. Lucien. Cale pushed back from the desk. He stood up and walked to the window, not to look at anything, just to move. Cairo recognized it. The specific way a person crosses a room when they need the distance between themselves and a piece of information. He let him have it. 40 seconds. Maybe 50. Then Cale came back and typed. This is wrong. Cairo had expected that. He typed back. The username logged in at 11:52. I can show you the server record. Lucien's credentials could have been used by someone else. Yes. I considered that. A pause. That's not what the pattern shows. Show me the pattern. Cairo opened the full file, the part he'd held back since the first night. He laid it out in blocks. The 3 accounts, the connection structure, the way the transactions referenced an internal authorization code that only existed inside Kale's executive network. He showed Kale the communication thread, encrypted, routed through 4 different servers, but originating from a device registered to Lucien's private suite on the 41st floor. He showed him the date the thread started. 14 months ago. 8 months before Soren Virex's name appeared in any public biotech filing. Kale read every line. He didn't rush it. When he finished, he sat back and typed. He built the access before the operation existed. He built the operation. Cairo corrected. Silence. Virex was working for him? Virex was positioned by him. The biotech structure, the shell accounts, the public-facing operation, all of it was built to use your company's authorization systems as a relay. Clean on the outside. Running through infrastructure only someone at your level could access. Kale looked at the screen. Why? Cairo typed slowly. Because power held by one person is fragile. But power routed through someone else's empire, someone who doesn't even know they're carrying it, that's something different. He let that settle. Then, he wasn't building a competing operation. He was building leverage. Against you. Inside you. The words sat there on the screen between them. Inside. Kale's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. His phone buzzed. Not Cairo's phone. Kale's. A message from a number that wasn't saved. 5 words. Kale stared at it for 3 seconds. Then he turned the screen so Cairo could read it. You were never supposed to notice him. Cairo looked at the message. Looked at Kale. Lucien already knew they were looking. Which meant everything that came next had already been planned for. Cairo was gone by morning. Not quietly. Not willingly. The penthouse had 2 security checkpoints and a private elevator that required biometric clearance. Kale's team had been running a perimeter since the first night. None of it mattered. Because whoever moved Cairo hadn't come through the front. They'd come through the building's maintenance access, a service route that ran behind the kitchen wall and connected to the freight elevator on the service level. A route that wasn't on any guest-facing floor plan. A route that was on Kale's internal building documentation. The ones filed with his facilities team. On the 41st floor. Kale found the room empty at 6:14 a.m. The monitor Cairo had been using was still open. Still running. The transaction log still scrolling in real time. But one file was missing. Not deleted. Transferred. A single encrypted package, 12 minutes of data pulled from the shadow record, sent to an external address at 5:58 a.m. Not by Cairo. The device that sent it was registered to Lucien's private suite. Kale stood in the empty room for exactly 4 seconds. Then he made 3 calls. His security director. His technical lead. And a number that wasn't saved in his phone, a contact he never needed before, had never wanted to need, and was now the only option that moved faster than the problem. While he was on the 3rd call, his phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. He answered it expecting his tech lead calling back on a different line. It wasn't. It was a typed message. Routed through a text relay, the kind that bounced signals through multiple carriers before landing. Cairo. Private facility. Industrial district. I don't have the exact address, they covered the windows. But I caught 2 street names before they did. Ashland and 43rd, southwest corner. Then, they want the rest of the file. The source confirmation I never showed you. Then, after a pause that felt longer on a screen than it probably was in the room where it was sent. They're going to get it. I can't stop that part. Cale typed back immediately. I'm coming. The reply took 30 seconds. 30 seconds was a long time. No. Don't come the way you came last time. Cale stared at the message. Last time was controlled. Public. They let it happen because it built something they needed, your trust in a clean resolution. They needed you to believe it was over. A pause. It was never over. Another pause. Then the last message Kairos sent before the relay went dark. This time, don't come for me. The screen went blank. Cale set the phone down on the empty desk and looked at the monitor, still scrolling, still running, still tracking the accounts that had gone quiet 5 days ago. He looked at the timestamp on Kairos' last message. 6:31 a.m. He thought about the first night. The private lounge. The way Cairo had walked through that door without hesitation after everything that had already gone wrong. The way he'd laid the file out, not all of it, just enough. Holding something back not out of distrust but out of discipline. And now Lucien had him. In a room without windows. And Cale had been handed the one instruction that was designed to stop him from moving. He looked at the door. Then at the monitor. Then at his phone. He picked it up. And he didn't call his security director. He opened Cairo's transaction log. Because Cairo had said don't come the way you came last time. He hadn't said don't come. Cale didn't move for 11 minutes. That was the part nobody would have expected. Not speed. Not force. Not the immediate, reactive strike that Lucien had built his entire plan around triggering. 11 minutes of stillness. Sitting at the desk with Cairo's monitor running and his phone in his hand and every piece of the last 5 days laid out in his mind like a document he was reading for the second time, slower, cleaner, looking for what he'd missed the first pass. Lucien expected emotion. That was the architecture of the whole thing. The kidnapping wasn't about the file. The file was secondary. The kidnapping was designed to make Cale move on instinct. Rush in, expose his position, make a decision in the dark that could be used against him later. Lucien had watched Cale operate for 12 years. He knew exactly what Cale looked like when he was reacting instead of thinking. So Cale thought. He pulled up the transaction log Cairo had been running. The shadow record. He went back 72 hours and read it the way Cairo had read it, not looking at the deposits, looking at the withdrawals. Not tracking what moved in, tracking what moved out and where it stopped. The 3 accounts had gone quiet at 11:49 p.m. 5 days ago. But one of them had a recurring automated transfer. Small. Regular. The kind of transfer that kept a utility account funded, heating, power, a building services contract. It hadn't stopped. Because it was automated. And whoever shut the accounts down had flagged the primary transactions but missed the background ones. Cairo had caught it. It was in the file. The part he'd held back. The part that was now in Lucien's hands. Which meant Lucien had the address. And if he had the address, he already knew Cale would find it eventually. Which meant the facility wasn't meant to be permanent. It was a clock. Cale stood up. He called his technical lead, not to request a trace, not to pull footage, not to run a standard security response. He gave 3 specific instructions that took 40 seconds to deliver and required 0 explanation on the other end because he'd worked with this person long enough that context wasn't necessary. Then he called the number he didn't like calling. 12 minutes later, 2 unmarked vehicles were parked on Ashland Avenue, engine off, lights off, waiting. Cale wasn't in either of them. He went in through the loading dock on the south side of the building. The entrance that the utility account was paying to keep active. A door that was supposed to be locked but wasn't, because the service contract included keypad access for maintenance personnel. He used the code. It worked. Inside, concrete floors, low light, the smell of a building that had been functional recently and abandoned quickly. 2 corridors. One leading left toward what sounded like ventilation equipment. One leading right, toward a room where a single light was on underneath the door. He went right. He didn't knock. He opened the door and stepped into a room where Lucien Varick was sitting at a portable table with a laptop open and Cairo's encrypted files displayed on the screen, and Cairo himself seated against the far wall, hands bound, phone gone, eyes up the moment the door moved. Lucien looked at Cale. He didn't panic. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands on the table. "You used the utility code," Lucien said. Not a question. Almost impressed. "Cairo found the account," Cale said. "You missed it when you cleared the others." Lucien nodded slowly. "I expected you to come through the front with a response team." A pause. "That was my timeline." "I know. You moved slower than I planned for." "I know that too." Lucien looked at him across the table. 12 years of shared rooms, shared decisions, shared language. The particular familiarity of someone who had sat beside you long enough to know how you thought. "You were always going to find this eventually," Lucien said. "I built the operation knowing that. The question was never if." He tilted his head slightly. "The question was whether finding it would cost you enough that you'd be manageable afterward." Cale looked at him. "You needed me reactive," Cale said. "Yes. Emotionally exposed. Moving fast. Making decisions from the wrong position." "Yes." Cale's voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. That was your mistake," he said. The door behind Cale opened. 3 people entered, not security, not a response team. A federal compliance officer whose name had appeared on the original Medaxon filing. A forensic accountant who had been working Cale's private retainer for 6 months without knowing why. And a representative from the agency whose name Cale had called from the number he didn't like calling. Lucien looked at the door. Then at the laptop. Then at Cale. "You didn't just find me," Lucien said quietly. "No. You used the 11 minutes to close the network. I used the 11 minutes to do what you built 12 years of access trying to prevent." Cale stepped back toward the door. "You wanted me reactive. Exposed. Moved by something personal." A pause. "You gave me 11 minutes to be exactly that." He looked at Cairo briefly, just once, direct, no performance in it. "I used them differently." The compliance officer moved to the table. Lucien didn't resist. He just looked at Cale one last time with the expression of a man who had planned for everything except the version of the person he thought he knew. Nobody called it a rescue. That was the first thing Cairo noticed. No announcement. No moment where someone stood in a doorway and delivered a line that was meant to feel significant. Cale crossed the room, cut the binding, checked Cairo's hands without asking, and then stepped back and gave him the space to stand on his own. Which he did. They walked out of the building through the loading dock the same way Cale had come in. 2 men. 1 door. The sound of the city picking up its morning rhythm outside. Cairo's phone was recovered from Lucien's laptop bag, still locked, untouched. Lucien had cracked the file transfer but hadn't gotten past the secondary encryption on the source confirmation. The 11 weeks of original evidence was intact. The unmarked vehicles on Ashland pulled away before Cairo and Cale reached the street. By the time they were in the car, Lucien's network was already being processed. Not dramatically. Not publicly. The kind of dismantling that happened in filing rooms and server logs. Quiet, comprehensive, permanent. No press conference. No headline. Just the system closing around something that had been running inside it, undetected, for 14 months. They rode in silence for a while. Chicago moved past the windows, delivery trucks, early commuters, a city that hadn't noticed anything happened and wouldn't. Cairo looked at the skyline and thought about the 11 minutes. He'd been in that room, hands bound, watching Lucien try to crack a file he'd encrypted in layers specifically because he'd always understood that the most dangerous moment in any investigation wasn't when you found the answer. It was the window between finding it and being able to do anything with it. He built the encryption to buy time. He just hadn't known whose time it would buy. Eventually, he opened his notes app. Typed, "You didn't come the way I told you not to come." Kale read it. Typed back, "You said don't come the way I came last time." "I didn't." Cairo looked at the response. Typed, "Technical. Accurate." Cairo looked out the window. "Why didn't you just send the response team?" Cale didn't answer immediately. When he did, the message was short. "Because Lucien planned for the response team. He planned for you too. He planned for the version of me he'd spent 12 years building a file on." A pause. "He forgot that file was out of date." Cairo read the message twice. Then he typed the question that had been sitting in him since the loading dock. "Why didn't you run?" Cale looked up from his phone. Cairo met his eyes and held them, the same steadiness he brought to every room, every table, every space where his silence had always been the loudest thing present. He typed, "Not you. Me. After the first night, after Virex, after the lounge, you had enough to move on without me. You had the framework. You could have handed it to your legal team and walked away from the variable. You stayed. Yes. Why?" Cale looked at the message. Outside, Chicago kept moving. The sun had cleared the building line, low, flat, early morning light running gold across the glass towers. He typed slowly. Because the thing that broke Lucien's plan wasn't the file. It wasn't the account. It wasn't the 11 minutes. He hit send. Then typed the second part separately. It was you holding back the source confirmation. The one piece no one else had. The decision to trust partially. Not completely, not at all, exactly enough. A pause. That doesn't come from a variable. That comes from a person. Cairo looked at the message for a long time. The car moved through the city. The lights shifted. He typed one last line. "Because you didn't come to save me, you came to end it." Cale read it. Didn't correct it. Didn't add to it. Because it was exactly right. And that's where the story ends. Not with noise. Not with a moment designed to impress anyone. Just two men in a moving car, a city that didn't know what had happened inside it, and a system that was being quietly closed from the inside out. Cairo didn't disappear this time. That was the thing Cale noticed, and didn't say, because some things carry more weight when they're understood instead of spoken. Cairo stayed. Not because he owed anything. Not because he was out of options. Because the person across from him had used 11 minutes of silence to make a decision that no amount of power alone could have made. And that was worth staying for.